Well, hello YouTube. This is Jay, and let me just start out right up front saying thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope that you will go on this 3-video journey with me as I expand on my square sweater theme. And just let you know, the blue-green sweater was just the beginning. And I want to just immediately follow it up with not only 1, 2, but 3 new sweaters. And I hope you enjoy each one. It will be 3 separate tutorials. But I'm going to lay some foundation work starting with this video. So let's just kind of settle in and relax. And as I start, I'm going to break everything down as simple as possible. And before we even go to the sweater, let's do a little review of the information I gave you in the blue-green sweater. And some of that information, well, it was quite a lot, but it's most important, especially for beginners or intermediate that are not sure. And so I'm just going to quickly do a nice review, point by point, and then we'll get more. I'll show you the sweater, and we'll get into the step-by-step of the first video. So, with that said, the first thing that you'll have to do as we start to knit these sweaters, as you saw in the pictures before, first thing we're going to have to do is find your size. And every pattern, every book, everything always asks you right up front. They either give you some measurements or they'll tell you to do a gauge and try to find your measurement. And I tried to break it down and show you the way I do it. It's not to replace anything that you know or that you already do that's working for you. It's just another tool. And I'm going to just go step by step. Find your gauge. Gauge. What is gauge? And when we're talking about gauge, you have a certain size knitting needle and a certain weight of yarn that you're going to be working with. And you need to know how many stitches to the inch that particular yarn on that particular needle will give you, because we're going to use that number and our tape measure to find our size. And one of the first things you can do is simply knit up a swatch of fabric. This is fabric that I used from the previous video. But knit up a nice size, doesn't have to be this large. Enough for you to simply lay. You can just use a plain ruler. And all I want to do is lay this ruler, just lay it at the edge of a stitch, and I'm just going to count over 1, 2, 3, 4. And I see that I can get 4 stitches for this particular needle, which in my case is a number 8, and this particular yarn, which probably on the band, normally on the band they give you a suggested needle to use for a certain size. So for this needle and this yarn, I get 4 stitches to the inch, which is all I'm really concerned about. There are other ways, and other people do gauge different. I'm just gonna, this style of knitting and the simplicity of this simple square, I know it's not a real square, that's just the thing. It's a very loose fitting garment, and all we want to do is get a number that's close to what you need to fit your body and to be able to knit it. So for instance, I have 4 stitches to the inch. Now, in the previous video, I told you that sometimes, because I knit so much, that when I do my gauge, just like I showed you with the ruler, for instance, when I take a tape measure and measure from my right side to my left side, just going across the front, and I pull the tape nice and tight. Say if you had got 25 inches. Okay, well that simply means that for that needle and that yarn, I would take, it's 4 stitches to the inch, I would take 4 times 25, and that would equal 100. Well, I told you and shared with you before that usually is too large, and even at my weight now, it just seems that's just a little too large. So, since I knit with certain needles most of the time for my garments, I decided to just simply take a lot of my favorite yarns and just make myself a long tape measure. I just sit and cast on a whole lot of stitches, well more than what I needed, and I did some knit rows, some stockinette rows. I even threw in some rib at the top so that I could have this at all times. Now, the gauge on here is the same as what I just measured, 4 stitches to the inch. But when I take this tape and actually stretch it from my left side or my right side all the way around the front, you don't have to go all the way around your body, just across the front, and pull it tight to where I want it to fit, I usually would come up 6 to 8 stitches shorter than what I had when I did the regular gauge. And believe it or not, 6 to 8 stitches front and back makes a big difference on the fit of your garment. So you don't have to do that all the time, but I was just showing you, and it just sometimes, especially if it's something new or a new yarn that I haven't used, I'd like to know the real time, the real feel of this fabric on my body. How much stretch does it have? And when I stretch it out and actually, you know, because I'd put a marker, and then I'd sit down and count how many stitches and then compare it. And usually my tape, like I said, is about 6 to 8 stitches shorter than if I would just do the ruler and use that. But either way, you have to get to some type of number. And if you remember, on my on the blue-green tape, I kept asking you, what are your numbers? It's not just one number. I think people think it's just one number. No, I call it my little group, my little section of numbers. And my numbers can range anywhere from 92 up to 96. That means anytime I can have a gauge that will 92, not below 92, but 92 up to 96. If it goes over 96, I know it's going to start being too loose. So I can work within that range, because as you see, we're going to be using patterns from a stitch book, and sometimes you can't always get an even number. It's really good to try to get a number that's divisible by 2 or 4. But sometimes, and you'll see on this particular sweater we're going to knit, the first thing I thought is, oh no, after I told them one thing, but my number is going to be 93. It fits in my range of from 92 to 96. So you'll have a low number, and you will probably have a number at least, 4 stitches more. That's a higher number, just by simply counting your stitches to see which stitches fit you the best. But there is a range, so it's not just one number, it's like a range, and mine is 92 up to 96. And I'm going to show you how it works. So now we've discussed gauge, and just a quick review. To work these sweaters, my square theme sweaters, and that's all it is, it's a theme. I know it's not a complete square. It's just the idea, because later on, as we move into our winter colors and winter yarn or heavier yarn, we will transition into the rectangle, what I call the rectangle theme sweaters. So the first thing I had you to do, when, if you remember, on the blue-green sweater, is to take a tape measure and simply measure from the top of your shoulder down to the length that you want your sweater, your normal sweater. You can even measure one of your shirts or something that you really like wearing. But it's just best to just take the tape measure down from your shoulder to where you want your sweater to stop. And like I say, keep simple numbers. It just makes a big difference later on. So, my number is 20. And that means I'm going to try to stay within that range of 20 as much as possible. Then you're going to take the tape measure, just like we said a minute ago on the gauge. I simply take it from my left or right, doesn't matter, from one side across the front to the other side, and pull it nice and tight. And really my size is 24. I don't know why I just used 25. It just popped in my head. But you write down how many inches on your tape that it takes to go from one left side across the front to the right side. And those are the measurements that we're going to work these sweaters in. Inside, these numbers can change according to whatever pattern you're going to use or you pick out. But we try to stay to this number and to the number of stitches across the bottom. And of course, the same numbers will apply to the back of the sweater because it's done in two pieces. Okay, how does that sound? Alright, let's get on. The last point I really want to make is, okay, so we find a pattern. We get our stitch book, and we kind of decide on a few things before we actually pick the pattern. So let me get the stitch book, and we'll go through that step. Okay, I just wanted to show you. Here's another one of my stitch books. Like I say, I'll do maybe a stitch book tutorial on down the road. But very nice book, very good book, one of my favorites. And out of this book, I was able to find one that a stitch that I really liked to demonstrate for this sweater. And one of the things, well, there's several things you need to when you're deciding a stitch. Okay, a lot of some stitch books, or a lot of them, will just simply give you a small window of what the stitch looks like. Well, it's always good though to know what the end of the stitch, the bottom of the stitch looks like, because you want to know, can I put a border? Will it fit in the middle? Is it something, does it have a decorative edge like, you know, like some stitches do? And for instance, this book gives you the bottom edge of the swatch she's knitted up, so you can see what the bottom edge looks like. And they're calling this fallen leaves, and there, of course, you can find this pattern in a lot of other stitch books. But I like to read through different books to see how that particular author or designer wrote up the pattern, because sometimes they add things or change things. So I read through the pattern from different books and find the one that I think will fit my project at that time, and this is the one that I picked because I like the way it's written up, and She did, it was very simple and to the point, and it worked well, and plus she showed I could see the bottom of the sweater, of the stitch, the swatch here. So that, in turn, let me know how I was going to design this sweater using this particular stitch. Since the stitch has such a pretty edge, I decided to turn it and work top down. We've been working bottom up on the blue-green, but I don't want you to get stuck always going just from the bottom up. This has such a pretty edge, I thought it would be nice, why not let the edge work for me and start at the top and work down. And of course, once I pull out the sweater, you'll see how pretty it really is. Next thing I like to tell you, this is just something I do, and it really makes a world of difference. Never work out of your books. As soon as you've decided or picked a pattern, then the first thing you want to do is make a black and white copy. I call it a working copy. And I guess it's reflecting. You can see that I've got it in a sheet protector, because you're gonna write down anything and everything that you do to this pattern as you knit this sweater. It needs to be put on this particular sheet that you've made a black and white copy. I never write in my books. Well, I used to. Then I realized what a mess when you go back to use it again. So I threw that out of the window a long time. I have everything I do, I make a black and white copy, just on your copy machine. And it's just for your purpose and for your use. And anytime I ever want to make this sweater again, this part is done. I never have to redo this. Only thing I have to do is pick color or yarn or whatever. So for instance, on this black and white, I write down the yarn name, I write down the size needle that I would be knitting the garment with, I write down my range of numbers, and mine are 92 to 96, so I'll know what I'm working with. Then I'm going to show you how to write the formula. I call it a formula, and you'll see why. On the blue-green sweater, if that wasn't clear, I'm going to go over the formula again, how to make your own formula. And then you just write a few notes to yourself to get started. And I wrote down row 1 starts at the neck edge, so that I know that this sweater is worked top down. And I'm going to, for the front, I'm going to repeat the pattern 3 times. And then I have a surprise for you. We're going to add a little of the pattern to the back. And I'm going to repeat it 1 time plus 8 rows. See, all of that's written on here. I never have to figure this out again if I ever want to make this sweater in another color or something else. It's on here. It even tells me how many stitches I'm going to cast on. What do you think of that? And if you just, and then I keep a nice notebook through a binder, and every sweater I do, this is what I have that I can always go back to and knit the sweater. Now, one last thing, the formula. We're going to start with the formula, and then we're going to see the sweater, and then we're going to have fun. We're going to knit. Okay. It's not as hard as it looks, and all you need is yourself a little calculator. And I keep little calculators. I get them at the Dollar Tree. I get them real cheap, and I keep them in every bag I have. So if I'm ever anywhere, I need my little calculator to figure something, I have one. So, the pattern that I picked out is the Falling Leaves lace pattern out of my stitch book that I showed you. This pattern calls for a multiple of 10 stitches. That's how many stitches it takes to do 1 repeat. And at the end, plus 1 extra stitch. So however many number of repeats you want, at the very end you'd add 1 more stitch to the count. So, for instance, A multiple of 10 plus 1. Alright, example. For this sweater, it's not like a vest that I'm going to wear a turtleneck or something under it. It's going to be pretty much a nice body-fitting sweater, like the blue-green. So I went to my low range number, and my number is 92. Like I said, I try to get a number that's divisible by 2 or 4 in your range numbers. And it's alright. If you had 91, just add one more to your count and make 92 your number. If it was 87, not divisible by 2 or 4, add one more, make it 88. It's going to make your life a whole lot easier and you'll understand it. So I went to my low range number of 92 stitches. We're talking about stitches here. Okay. So, next thing I need to ask myself, well, on this sweater, we're designing, it's your sweater. Do I want to just knit to the edge of each edge, or would I like a border, some type of border? Or some people may call it a salvage, or some people may call it, but I call it a border. So I use B for border. That just reminds me. You can call it edge. Some people might call it the edge stitch. Alright, do I want a border? And usually I do, because you've seen how I like sometimes to have the little split, or I just like the neatness with the border in there. I don't have to wrestle with that curling edges, and you can just sew it up really well and it just looks real pretty. But now we won't always use that, so don't get that you have to. So I take the 92 stitches, that's my number, and then each border, you got to have a right side, left side and a right side, and I'm using 4 stitches on each side. Okay, well that's 8. 4 and 4 is 8. So I go ahead and remove those stitches from my count. I take 8 from 92, will leave me 84 stitches to work with my design. A border on each side leaves me 84 stitches to work with. Okay, so now I know it takes 10 repeats. So I need to know how many repeats can I get into 84 without going over. How many repeats? It takes 10 stitches to make a repeat. How many can I get into 84? That's my filler for the pattern without going over. Well, if I take 8 times 10 equals 80. Then I add the plus 1 equals 81. So I have 84 stitches to work with, and I figure out how many repeats I can get in that 84, and I come up with the number of 81 stitches. Okay, now if I subtract, well, you can see that they're not equal, so if I subtract 81 stitches from 84, I have 3 stitches left over. I spelled it right this time. I have 3 stitches left over. Well, like I said before, what are you going to do with those stitches? You have to use them. You have to put them somewhere. You just can't okay, get rid of them. No. Well, I like to just simply divide them in half and put them on each side of my pattern. They're just extra stitches. But now it's so hard to remember, okay, well, I only have 3. Well, it's alright. Just add 1 stitch and make it even. See, it's just really simple. Simple math. I'm not an expert. So, in order to just get these leftover stitches to an even number, I simply add 1 stitch to the 3. Now I have 4 stitches left over that I need to do something with. So here is my formula for this sweater. I have 4 stitches for one side of my border. I divide that 4, and I'll put 2 stitches, and we can place markers. Then my fill that I will put the design in is right here, 81. So I put that big block around there so you can see it. That's where the pattern will go. Then, of course, I had 2 other extra stitches on this side because I just divided 4 in half. So 2 and 2, that's 4. And then, of course, I have to match this side of the border with this, so that's my border of 4 stitches on this side. And if you add all of these numbers up, it will equal 93 stitches for me to cast on for this sweater on this needle to fit me. And everything I do has a formula. I do the formula. And you never have to do, like I said, then you write the formula on your black and white. You never have to do this again. I can pick this black and white out of my ring binder a year from now and decide, oh, that would be really cute in black. I think I'd like to make this sweater in black. Well, I don't have to well, let's see, what do I need to do? No, it's right here. It tells me what yarn I use that time, but I may pick another yarn, well, if I want black. But what size needle? I know my range of numbers. I know my formula. It's B4-2. 81 is for my pattern. 2, B4 equals 93 stitches, which is in my range of 92 to 96 stitches. It's gonna fit. So I come over here and put cast on 93 stitches. And a note to myself, row 1 starts at neck edge, sweater work top down. And then I wrote down again, front repeat pattern 3 times. And then when I get to the back, I'm going to show you how I repeated the pattern 1 time. But I needed to end the pattern nicely. You just can't just stop. So I found that I needed 8 more rows to end that pattern. And voila! That is all there is to gauge, to my formula. And I'm telling you, everything sweater or garment that I make a black and white copy. You will be surprised if you could just get this. Don't write it on those little sticky notes and all of that, or on a piece of paper and think you're going to remember. No. Make a copy of whatever you're going to use. A black and white. Write it down, and I'm telling you, a year from now, like I said, if I wanted to do it in black, it's already done for me. My problem is just don't gain any more weight so I can fit in it. Okay, that I may have to edit that out. What about you? So what do you think of this? Are you ready to knit with me? Because I have the 3, you've seen the pictures. I have 3 beautiful sweaters. They're all worked on this whole sheet, just like I explained it to you. So let's try it. Let's try it together. And I promise you, you will love wearing something that you designed yourself. What do you think about that?